Most people picture Air Force One the same way. Blue and white against a perfect sky, a president waving from the top of the stairs, cameras flashing, crowds pressing against barriers just to see a taxi past. From the outside, it looks like power moving through the air, controlled, confident, untouchable. Nobody thinks about what happens when it becomes a target. Nobody thinks about the person sitting in the left seat of that cockpit, hands resting on the controls of a Boeing 747, responsible for keeping the most powerful individual on Earth alive while the world outside quietly falls apart. That person is you. And nothing about how you got here makes sense until you understand what this job actually requires. The selection process doesn't begin with flying. It begins with everything else. Before anyone asks whether you can handle a 747 in an emergency, they need to know whether they can trust you with a secret. Background investigators dig through decades of your life, financial records, relationships, every address you've ever lived at, every person who's ever known your name. Investigators interview at least 4 personal references, neighborhood residents, and conduct the subject interview themselves, searching for anything that might suggest you could be compromised, manipulated, or broken under pressure. Most pilots never make it past this stage, not because they can't fly, because their lives contain too many unknowns. The psychological evaluation comes next. Prospective pilots undergo a rigorous psychological evaluation, assessing emotional stability, decision-making abilities, and resilience in high-stress situations. They don't want to know if you're brave. Brave people do unpredictable things. They want to know if you're stable, if your mind behaves the same way at hour 14 of a crisis as it does at hour 1. They want to know if panic can find a way inside you. They put you inside simulations where everything fails simultaneously and watch what your hands do before your brain tells them to move. Some candidates freeze. Some candidates make the right decisions, but make them too slowly. Both outcomes end the same way. By the time the program finishes selecting you, you've been studied more carefully than almost any other person serving in uniform. And even then, you're not flying the president yet. You're flying everything else first. Cargo planes, i.e. IP transports, years of accumulating hours and judgment, and the specific kind of patience that only develops when you've spent enough time waiting for something terrible to happen and choosing not to react until you're certain. The job, stated simply, was to safely transport the President of the United States to any location in the world. The challenge was doing it with zero failure. Zero failure. 2 words that follow you everywhere. Eventually, after years that blur together into one long accumulation of procedures and protocols and classified briefings, you walk into the cockpit of Air Force One for the first time as its commander. The aircraft is enormous from the outside. From the front seat, it becomes something else entirely. 87 telephones across 3 networks ranging from top secret to non-secure. State-of-the-art navigation and communications equipment most commercial carriers have never seen. A flying command center capable of connecting a sitting president to every corner of the government while staying airborne long enough to outlast whatever catastrophe is unfolding below. You learn every system, every redundancy, every option the aircraft gives you if one path disappears. Because your job isn't just piloting. Your job is problem solving at 500 miles per hour while everyone behind you is counting on you to look completely unbothered. The morning shifts begin at a pace that feels almost mundane. Security screenings, classified weather briefings, coordination with the Secret Service advance team already positioned at your destination. For 30 minutes before Air Force One passes any given point, all other aircraft in the vicinity are diverted. Military fighter jets enforce this on a secret channel. The bubble of controlled airspace that follows this aircraft everywhere feels invisible from inside the cockpit. You stop noticing it after a while, like a person who stops hearing a sound they've lived beside for long enough. But the bubble isn't what protects you during an attack. You are. One morning, the aircraft is parked on the tarmac of a civilian airport in Florida. The president is off the plane attending a scheduled event at a local school. Your job for the next 2 hours is straightforward. Wait, monitor, stay ready. You've done this hundreds of times. The routine is so familiar it feels mechanical. Then the first call comes in. Something has happened. Far away, A city skyline you know by memory suddenly exists in a different way than it did 30 seconds ago. The information arrives in fragments, the way it always does during the first minutes of a catastrophe. Your crew begins moving before you finish processing what you've just heard. Not because panic told them to, because training told them to. There's a difference. One feels like falling, the other feels like landing. You get the president back to the aircraft. He boards quickly, stands near the cockpit, and says something simple.
It's time to get home.
You jump into the left seat. The runway ahead looks exactly as it always has. But the world outside has changed completely in the last hour, and you don't fully understand the shape of that change yet. That's the part nobody explains in training. The information during a real event is never clean, never confirmed, never arriving in the order you need it. Reports arrive simultaneously. A false alarm about someone with a missile on the runway, unknown aircraft not responding to radio calls, attack locations multiplying faster than they can be verified. There was nothing anyone could do, and they were completely caught mid-plan. You take off steep, steeper than normal. Later, the president jokes that he had to lean forward. You don't laugh yet, because somewhere in the sky above a city you know well, pieces of something enormous are still falling. And nobody has confirmed whether this aircraft, this unmistakable, impossible to miss aircraft, is on someone's list of remaining targets. Then it arrives through the classified line. A voice announces the relocation of the President of the United States. A highly classified plan, never before executed, for the continuity of government. The Vice President is moving into position. The Speaker of the House is moving into position. A location needs to be determined to keep the President and the government safe. The cockpit absorbs this information quietly. You climb 45,000 feet, higher than commercial aircraft fly, to prevent external threats from reaching the aircraft. Up here, the sky turns a shade darker. The curvature of the earth becomes visible at the edges of your windscreen. You are above almost everything now, except the weight of what you're carrying. Behind the sealed cockpit door, a president is speaking to vice presidents and generals and advisors about decisions that will shape the next decade of human history. You can hear pieces of those conversations when they're piped into your headset. You sit with that information and continue flying. Straight, calm, controlled. Then two aircraft appear on your scope. Unknown, unidentified, not responding. Your co-pilot's eyes find yours for exactly half a second. This is the moment every pilot in this aircraft's history has been trained to handle, but secretly hoped would never arrive. Two shapes in the sky that might be friendly, that might not be. You don't have the luxury of waiting long enough to be certain. The unidentified jets close the distance before finally identifying themselves. A flight of two F-16s, confirming they are your cover. The air inside the cockpit changes. Not relief, something smaller than relief. A temporary loosening of pressure that doesn't fully release because you understand there are still hours left in this flight and the situation on the ground is still unresolved. So you continue doing the only thing you can do. You fly the aircraft. You fly it at maximum cruise speed across a country that feels different than the one you took off from. Cities pass below you, millions of people driving, working, watching screens in shock. Not one of them looks up and sees the aircraft carrying their president streaking overhead with fighters on its wings and classified conversations moving through its phone lines at the speed of encrypted signal. They don't know you exist. And that's exactly how this was designed. Hours pass, not minutes, hours. Inside a cockpit that exists somewhere between military operation and endurance test, your neck tightens. Your eyes stay on the instruments longer than necessary, not because something is wrong, but because looking away feels irresponsible right now. Every small sound the aircraft makes registers differently today than it did yesterday. The same vibration that meant nothing last week now demands a split second of evaluation before you let it go. That is what prolonged threat does to a human mind. It makes everything suspicious. It costs you pieces of yourself in exchange for attention. Eventually, clearance comes to land. The aircraft descends. The ground rises. The F-16s follow the entire way. When the wheels touch the runway, nobody inside the cockpit celebrates. Nobody exhales dramatically. You run through the post-landing checklist the same way you ran through every other checklist today, because the job doesn't care how you feel about what just happened. The base only cares whether you completed each step correctly. Later, much later, when the shift ends and the aircraft is secured and the world outside is trying to process something, it will spend decades understanding. You sit somewhere quiet and let the day arrive all at once. It hits differently than you expected. Not like fear catching up to you, more like clarity. A sudden understanding of exactly how thin the distance is between an ordinary day and a day that changes everything. You spent hours today carrying a man whose decisions would echo forward through time. You made choices in the cockpit, small, rapid, mechanical choices that added up to something much larger than any individual action. And nothing about those moments felt historic while they were happening. They felt like work, like training, like procedure applied under pressure until the pressure finally released. That's what nobody outside this aircraft ever understands. The moments that define history don't feel significant when you're inside them. They feel like the next thing on the checklist. You walk outside eventually. The sky is ordinary again. The same shade of late evening it always is when a long shift ends. Cars on the road, people carrying groceries. An entire population moving through a day that felt catastrophic from inside the cockpit, but which most of them experienced from a couch watching a screen, powerless and afraid in a completely different way than you were afraid. You think about the word zero failure. You think about what it actually costs to mean it, because zero failure isn't a philosophy that lives in manuals and training rooms. It lives in the part of your mind that refuses to accept that today is the day you make the mistake that costs everything. It lives in the discipline to stay calm when calm feels biologically impossible. It lives in years of repetition so deep that your hands do the right thing before your brain catches up. Most people will never know what you did today. They'll never know your name. They'll never read the full account of what happened inside that cockpit. The classified details will stay classified long after the moment stops mattering to anyone but historians. To the world, the aircraft landed safely and the president addressed the nation, and the next morning arrived like mornings always do. But you know what the morning almost didn't look like. You know how many quiet decisions stood between today and something irreversible. And the next time you walk up those stairs and settle into the left seat of that aircraft, you'll carry that knowledge with you the way you carry everything else that lives in this job, silently, completely, without ever letting it show. Because somewhere above the clouds, the most powerful person in the world is depending on you to fly as if the world below is not ending, even on the days it almost is.